Welcome. We are so excited to have you jump back in with us at our lunch hour. I hope you had a moment to capture your food. And we are going to spend our time now with a little Q&A with Jacquelyn Howard. I'm so excited to be able to introduce Jacquelyn and to have this conversation with her. Uh, the way this will work, Jacquelyn and I will do some Q&A to get us going, and then we will save time at the end for your questions. So as we work through this, we would love for you to be dropping questions in the chat, using the reactions to cheer along, agree, ask, and say, I've got a question as we go. And then after she and I have done a little conversation, we will let you jump in with your questions. And so before we begin, I just want to spend a little bit of time giving you some background on our guest. Jacquelyn is the Vice President of Global Supply Chain Direct Sourcing for the Starbucks Coffee Company. She's an experienced supply chain professional who's held a number of impactful leadership positions domestically and internationally. She holds a BS in Biomedical Engineering from Duke University and an MBA from the University of Delaware. She's earned many accolades throughout her career, including the 100 Most Influential Women in Supply Chain from Global Women in Supply Chain, China's 7-Star Quality Excellence Award, and the Hong Kong Malcolm Bridge Quality Awards. And there are many others if you look at her full bio. Outside of work, Jacquelyn gives back to the community as a member of the Seattle Goodwill Board of Directors, Interlux China and U.S. Food Safety Boards, the Center of Food Integrity Board, and a Seattle Girls School Capital Campaign member. You can learn more about Jacquelyn in her full bio, which is linked in the symposium platform. Our time is just going to be spent with a little Q&A followed by your questions. And I would love to get us started. So thank you, Jacquelyn, for joining us. Just for our participants' knowledge, Jacquelyn is joining us from the West Coast out in Seattle this morning. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for asking me to be part of this. It's so exciting.
Yes, we're so excited to have you here. And if you want to pin your video on Jacquelyn so you can see her, you just have to find in your upper right-hand corner, there's 3 dots on her video, and you can pin her so that you can see her face as we talk through this. So Jacquelyn, thank you so much. I would love if you would just start out giving us, I did your formal bio, but we'd love to hear a little bit of your background and your journey to the role that you currently have.
Sure. So I'm going to ask a favor of our participants. If you wouldn't mind turning your cameras on, because I don't like talking to blank screens or avatars. So it's morning for me. And if I can get up and look halfway okay, then I think you probably are wide awake in North Carolina. So thank you. Oh, look at that. So much better. Thank you. I guess they're all going to come on eventually. I know it's been hard with all the screen time and Zooming and such. So I get it. But this morning, I want to see faces because I know it's going to be a beautiful amount of people. Okay. So what was the question again, Teresa? Sorry.
No worries. I'd love to have for you to share with our audience a little bit of background about you and your journey to where you're at now with Starbucks.
Okay, well, it's not logical, so I'll throw it out there. So for all of you all that are considering defining your role in life permanently, don't do it, because I have constantly been able to take opportunities on because I haven't been so rigid in my expectations of myself. So I did start off coming out of high school wanting to be a surgeon because, I just wanted to be a doctor. I thought it was cool. I was never turned off by the idea of looking at, blood, or when I would get an inoculation, I'd be the one looking at the needle saying, how far in is that thing going to go? So it was always fascinating to me. I'm very curious. And so when I went off to college, I decided I really wanted to get out of Ohio and get away to go to college, and happened to be encouraged to apply to Duke. It wasn't one of my top listed colleges, but my uncle encouraged me to apply because he worked with someone who went to Duke and was very impressed with that person. So I did apply, and turned out that a friend of mine in high school who had moved away had also applied. And so I said, oh, well, I'll apply. I did get in, and then I went with my mother down to the college campuses all over North Carolina. I actually went to Davidson College, which was beautiful. But when I was there, the admissions officer from Duke, who knew I was in town, said, why don't you just come on over to the campus and have a look? And I think she knew that once I stepped foot on Duke's campus, I would be in love. And I was. It was unbelievable experience walking on campus, talking to students, and it had a hospital associated with it. So with that, being, focused on being a doctor, it was exciting for me to think about that. Now, having gone to college the first couple of years and knowing how crazy and hard it was, and then knowing I had to take things like organic chemistry and I wasn't that into it, and then seeing my friends struggle through it, I decided I did not want to be a physician, but I was still fascinated with medicine. So I kept the biomedical engineering degree in front of me, and I did finish with that degree. And I will tell you, senior year in college, I was in my final project presentation with my still friend Shelley, who's also one of my sorority sisters. And the professor came over to me and said, "So, what do you want to do with your degree?" And I said, "Not this. Like, I don't want to work at a laboratory and be away from like the mainstream of business." And so at that point, I realized I love science, I love math, I love everything about it, but I really wanted to be more in the business world. And I was, again, encouraged by the same uncle to think about getting an MBA. Because at that point, when I graduated back in the late 80s, the jobs within biomedical engineering are nothing like they are now. They were very lab based, they were very sort of like just regular, and they weren't cutting edge, they weren't surrounded by technology and all this stuff with the information that we have now and the exposure of the brilliance of what it can be. So it's very not so interesting. So I went back and got my MBA from University of Delaware. And if you know anyone famous that went to University of Delaware, put that in the chat right now, if you're paying attention to things. And then after that, that door of business opened up for me. And so from there, I got really excited about being not only technically savvy, but also being able to combine that with business. So every role that I've had was never mapped out. I did take my first position at DuPont in Charlotte, North Carolina, and it was in textile fibers. And I got to go to textile fibers school in North Carolina, at North Carolina State University. They have a fabulous textile fibers group there. I think it's still there. And so I took a whole week of very intense coursework in textile fibers. So again, I was able to learn something I hadn't studied in a very thoughtful manner, in a very process-oriented coursework. So from that, I stayed in textile fibers within DuPont for 10 years, but different roles. I went from programming and helping the manufacturing plants run their big machines to marketing in New York. I took a job in New York. That's right, Christopher, you got it right. President Biden and Jill actually went to University of Delaware. And then I ended up being focused on apparel sales. So I worked within New York in textile fibers, but worked with people who selected colors and fabrics for 2 years out. So that was really cool, working with retailers like Macy's and JCPenney and those fashion designers was a really cool thing to do when you're 25. And then I got a promotion, as you may think, why would you leave New York? Well, I got a promotion to go in direct sales in Charlotte again. So I moved back to Charlotte and ended up being in sales with DuPont and selling to yarn spinners who would make yarn for fabrics, which went into clothing. So in some way, shape, or form, I've been in supply chain, oddly enough, and didn't even know that it was called that back then. But after 10 years of being in textile fibers and a lot of changes happening with legislation, the marketplace in the United States started to shrink. And I was fortunate enough to get called by a recruiter to look into a role at McDonald's in what was then called purchasing. And it was still supply chain, but wasn't called supply chain back in the early 90s. So I took the job. I love Chicago. I thought McDonald's was an awesome brand. I figured people have to eat. And the supply chain within food is another fascinating route. So I was there for 19 years in different roles at McDonald's, but always working with the suppliers of the food products, and fascinating work. And so I worked in Chicago. I moved to California to do some regional work with the regional teams there and the operators of the stores and the suppliers on the West Coast. And then I moved back to Chicago for another leadership role. I had half of the food basket, as they call it, at McDonald's. I had categories like beef and bakery items and French fries. And then I had the opportunity to move overseas to China and run the supply chain for McDonald's there. Big move. And my family and I really enjoyed the 3 years there. That's a whole different story for later. Came back after the 3-year contract was up. I spent another year and a half at McDonald's, and I voluntarily said it's enough. I'm kind of finished with this. And my intention was just to be finished working at corporate because we planned for that. And then I got tapped on the shoulder by someone I found I met at a conference to come interview with Starbucks. And here I am. So now I'm in what we call sourcing, but as part of supply chain. But I work with all the suppliers of things like the packaging, the food items for Starbucks, the beverage ingredients of the syrups and the oat milk, if you guys have latched onto that most recent trend. And we're working on fun things like plant-based food, but we're also still very loyal to our suppliers of things of pork and chicken and produce, et cetera. So yeah, it's been fun. It's been different, but not one of that had been planned. So that's why I think flexibility and keeping your best foot forward and polishing your brand, your personal brand every day is super important. But along the way, people have helped me. I've never done anything by myself. And I think that's the other lesson too, is that you have to ask for help when you need it and you have to accept feedback when it's given to you. So I think that's enough. I'm sure there's some questions.
Yeah, I think that's great. And people, Gabby's celebrating your adventures in China. I am a little jealous of that. um, I would love, you are clearly very intimately familiar with the word supply chain, but I think some of us kind of, we have this vague, it's everyday use type idea of it. But I know in just talking with you briefly that there's a ton that fits under that umbrella. So
Yeah.
can you just give us a little bit about what supply chain is, and then specifically what STEM careers are underneath that?
Oh goodness. Oh goodness. Yes. Okay. So to make it kind of simple, I mean, I know you guys are brilliant because some of those projects are scary to me. I couldn't even think about doing half the projects that are on the listing in the science fair. So, and I think during COVID, everyone started hearing the word supply chain. Supply chain is broken. It's hard. Okay, so just think about everything that you touch, that you enjoy, that you use. Behind all those products or services is a supply chain. So I bought some props. Guess it's a coffee bag. So this is a coffee bag. It's a reserve blend from Starbucks. Does anyone know where coffee originated? Please put that in the chat, and I'll go on with my story. What is the very first part of the supply
Can
chain
we
when it comes
guess
to?
if we don't really know?
Oh, absolutely. Please do
Okay.
guess. I mean, that's part of being curious is guessing. Like, don't be scared. Don't be scared. Throw out something and turn your cameras on. The origin of coffee is Zach got it. Zach. I have nothing to give you but a big high five, virtual. Yeah, but go to Starbucks and drink some more coffee or tea. But what's the first step in the supply chain of coffee? What's the first step? Because you know there's a whole linkage of steps in a supply chain. What's the first step? Coffee. Harvest. Oh, back up a little bit. Plant. Yes. So the first step in the virtual or real supply chain of coffee is the farm, right? And the seeds. So Starbucks has done a brilliant job in doing something called cafe practices. Please look it up if you have a chance. What we do is we actually work with agronomists, STEM job. Agronomists are people who actually help to develop the best seeds and the best planting processes possible to bring the best products to life out of the ground. So agronomy, okay, number one. So those seeds that actually Starbucks helps the farmers in Ethiopia, in Guatemala, in Sumatra. So in all the places where farmers exist in the coffee belt, which is pretty much around the equator, think about science and the equator. So meteorologists are really important as well. We talk about planting and harvesting crops because you have to know the weather. So agriculture is very dependent on the weather. So meteorologists are very important in the science behind coffee. So those seeds are planted in the ground. Those seeds that Starbucks helps the farmers with are given free to the Starbucks farmers. That is something that Starbucks does. Yes, we do not sell our seeds. We give them to our farmers because we are trying to provoke good agricultural practices, but also provoke what? Economic development. So you think about economists. Economists are part of the supply chain because you want to make sure the math works for everybody. The math has to work for the farmers. They have to make money to go back and reinvest. The math has to work as far as getting the goods and services all the way to the customer. It's affordable. So economy, finance, big time, important. I work with a lot of finance people, and my financial acumen has to be very, very good, because I have to know when the math doesn't work, or the equation's not right, or it's not profitable for the farmer or for Starbucks. So think about that as a career as well. So as these planted seeds get grown, they grow into plants. And actually mine's outside and I have to go fix it because I left it out. It was kind of cold, but you can grow your own coffee plants at home. It's really cool. The planting of those seeds and the growth of those plants is super important. You have to prune them. They have to be in the right temperature. They have to have the right sunlight. But once those trees are ready to produce cherries, those cherries are then at the right point picked by hand still. So the farmers and their staff have to know exactly when to pick the cherries off the plants. And then they have to make sure that they are either sun-dried or actually dried differently. So I've been blessed to be able to go to Costa Rica right before COVID and see this entire process at the Starbucks-owned agronomist and coffee facility in Costa Rica. We built that for the farmers to teach them the right way to grow and plant their seeds. So from that, they're dried, they're taken into the huge burlap bags. You've probably seen this. And then those are shipped all the way over to whatever port needs to be readied for their delivery. So think about this. Those seeds have gone now from the cherry. Those seeds have gone from the tree to the cherry to some place to be harvested, to taken to be sun-dried or somehow dried, then taken to some place to be shipped. Guess what? Logistics. You got to get it to and from, right? So just think about that as a career. Logistics. You've seen those big old giant tankers, one of which is stuck in the Suez Canal right now, literally stuck, right? They're huge. And you've seen them, if you ever live by water, see all these different kind of like transformer looking cranes. They're taking those containers off the ship and they're putting into rail cars or on truckers, cabs. Logistics. If you don't have your logistics, your product is not going anywhere. So that's another career, right? You got to figure out how to get something here and there. You got to talk to people, you got to hire people, they got to move it, etc. So really interesting line of work. Logistics is huge. And that's what part of supply chain most people see, because you see trucks going down the road, you see containers coming off of these ships, and you see things being taken off the trucks, Amazon, right, and delivered to you. So from that point, those beans are then, or those dried beans are taken to a roasting plant. That's another whole supply chain, building plants and manufacturing. Huge environmental focus to make sure we don't waste any mileage, full truckloads, and then they're roasted. And those beans are then taken and put into bags, right? Materials, packaging, another career. Packaging engineers, very important. These printed cards, another part of supply chain. This is all the information about the Ethiopian beans printed. So somebody has to research this, and so that then is taken to our distribution centers, where they're actually put on another trucks, and the last mile is taken right to the store. So you can buy your bag of beans knowing all that supply chains right there. That's just coffee. So imagine this cup, your earphones, all this has some kind of origin. The other piece of supply chain, which I find fascinating and very important, is ethical sourcing. Making sure people who work on farms, making sure animals that are raised to be harvested for food, making sure the environment is taken care of. There's a lot of damage control, right? We have to make sure people are treating things fairly and ethically. That's another science. Auditing, making sure you go on the farm and you understand audits. My sister works for the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. So she audits plants, some of which we buy from, to make sure that their processes are the ones that were supposed to be done and approved by the FDA. So lots of careers there. I can go on and on because I think it's fascinating. How did I learn it all? I read a lot. I listen a lot. I travel a lot. I'm always looking and listening, doing something. My mom's like, do you ever just chill? I'm like, yeah, I'm chilling by listening to a book. That's how I chill. I was listening to a podcast this morning. Why not? I mean, I don't watch Housewives of whatever city. I just cannot. But I do love comedy. But there are a lot of things that you can take in and learn along the way. And I'm just very curious. So that's a supply chain. Does that make sense? I mean, the word is just so like weird. And so now I took it apart for you. So now as you look at things, you'll probably be curious about the supply chain behind it.
Yes, that's great. We have a couple of questions if you don't mind me throwing them to
Oh,
you
of
right
course.
now. Yeah, so I saw you saw the first one. The next is the ship that's stuck in the Suez Canal. Is that affecting Starbucks?
No, not that I know of.
You're like,
Not that I know
not
of. I
yet.
mean, who knows? There's so much stuff that goes on in the world. It could be a piece of something. It could be a piece of something in our supply chain, but I don't think so, because I just don't. I haven't heard anything, and quite frankly, we have really smart people working on things, and we have what's called resiliency. So
Mm.
if something is stuck, it wouldn't stop our business. We're too big to have one Suez Canal issue stop us. COVID, however, was another discussion because all commerce was affected. But there's a whole different group of people who work on moving our beans around the world, and they're impressive. It's out of Switzerland. And I've had a chance to talk to one of the gentlemen when I was visiting China. I was just like, wow, what a cool job. You're sitting there working with farmers, working with container ship companies. You're working with our people that come into the port and pick the stuff up and are just amazing work. And they're very smart because they also do the commodity risk management, another career. So they work on making sure that we know the price of the beans before they show up at the store. That's another really cool job, is commodity risk management. You could work on a trading floor in Chicago. You could work in Switzerland. There's a lot of transactions that happen because coffee is a very big industry.
Great. Thank you. Zach's wondering if you can elaborate on what it means to be certified organic.
Oh, well, it depends on the country. And obviously, there's a lot of controversy about people making things up around organic, but there is a process in which you have to be certified, from how you actually, what is in your fertilizer or not, the natural pieces of how you do your harvest, planting and harvesting, how you take care of either the animal or the plant along the way. Some things are forbidden to be used if it's supposed to be certified organic. It can be a little bit more pricey depending, and there's a lot of good science behind good agricultural practices that does not have to include organic. So do your research on that too. People are all tangled up in what they've read on the internet about GMOs, for example. But there's actually a lot of basic science and farming practices behind some of those practices to bring the best qualities of the best seeds to life. So you don't have to use as much water. You don't have to use as much pesticide, because you're picking the best, most robust plants. And that's going to enable us to be able to feed the world, quite frankly. Because there's a lot of products that cannot be planted in some parts of the world because the ground is too dry, or there's too much rain, or there's not enough rain. So some of these plants, these seeds actually helps other people, other farmers become much more economically sound, and they can feed the world differently. So please do your own research on those topics.
Great. And then in supply chain, how do you deal with it if you run into something that was not ethically harvested or made?
Oh, yeah. So we have to take action. Depending on how severe the issue is, we could do anything from cite them and work on a process in which they have to improve. So it could be something very small, but if it's something very difficult or something very harsh, we will cut ties quickly. And I've been in situations where there's been some animal abuse or some environmental damage, and we've had to basically walk away from that plant and that supplier potentially. Really difficult, which is again why you have to have a backup plan for every part of your supply chain. So you don't want to have too many exclusive plants that you buy from, or manufacturing facilities, or farms, because if something happens, you're out of supply. And I think that was really quite highlighted during COVID. A lot of these major plants that had 3,000 people in them were shut down because people were getting sick and there was no throughput. So they couldn't even bring anything to the plant or get anything made. And so imagine not having enough milk, for example, or coffee beans or packaging. I mean, every plant from every part of the supply chain was affected because they were people dependent. And COVID was very infectious and continues to be very infectious.
Oh, great. And then one more. Do you know if there's GMO being used in the coffee plants?
No.
Okay. And then
Nope.
the follow-up is, do you know if that's dangerous for the plants? Is it harmful?
I didn't hear that. What's that question?
Is it dangerous for the plants, is what it says.
Is what
Is it?
dangerous? Having GMO plants?
Mhm.
No, that's why I think the research around GMO is fascinating. Danger is defined as what? I mean, at the end of the day, if you don't have the most robust plants in the ground, think about how much you have to do to bring them to harvest. You might have to overdose in fertilizer, and that some of that fertilizer has nitrogen in it, and it can provide issues when it rains. There's runoff, and runoff can go into the water supply. So all these practices are, if you ever go to a farm that's really well run, these farmers are amazing. They know what to do and what not to do. And they get pretty frustrated when people make stuff up or take something and exaggerate it. And so I really implore you, if you're really interested in agriculture, go to your local farm when it's safe to do that. And I think most farmers will welcome you onto their farm and tell you about things. A lot of people have opened up their plants and their farm so people can really learn the truth. I find it all fascinating. I mean, you have to understand these are people's lifestyles. Why would they damage themselves by doing the wrong thing? They could put themselves out of business. And so part of this is why would we knowingly do the wrong thing when everything is so discoverable now that it could shut you down? It could shut you down. So let's always think good intentions. There are some people out there with malintent, but on the most part, these farmers are generations deep and they want to continue their businesses and they want to do the right thing for the earth. Because if you take from the earth without regard, you're not going to have the earth to use. So it's all about making sure you take care of the future.
Great, thank you. There's another question in the chat, Zach. I see it. I'm going to ask one first, and then I'll get to yours. So, Jacquelyn, you have been working in global supply chain for a while now, and earned lots of accolades in this process. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about global collaboration. Like, what does it take to be effective in global collaboration? What's important?
Oh, well, first of all, you got to be humble. I think sometimes when you're raised in a certain way, you don't really know the world works differently outside of your knowing, your consciousness. So, um, before we actually went over to China, I've done a lot of traveling in general. This has nothing to do with work. I just love to travel, which is why COVID's killing us. We want to get out of here. um, I do a lot of research, but before our trip to China, our visit in our stay in 3 years to China, we actually had a cultural training. So we were educated by people who understood the culture of China. And within China, even there's a lot of different subcultures and subgroups. And so it's not all one size fits all, but it gave us a bit more knowledge about how to operate positively in the country. And some of the Western ways are just not approved and appropriate in China. And so part of it is keeping your mind open that the world does not revolve around you or your practices or your beliefs. And so being open-minded and understanding and curious in the right way of other cultures will always draw people to you. And so we went to China. We remained curious. We traveled to 9 countries while we were there. That was a benefit too. Once you're over there, plane trips are really easy and they're affordable once you get over there. And then once you're there, actually the environment was so friendly. We went to Thailand, Japan, Taiwan, Singapore, Malaysia. And so with those trips, we always went to a museum. We've always tried to do tours to learn our knowledge base. And with that, people are just happy that you care. And so they're more willing to reach out and say, hey, when you're in town, let me know. So when my daughter and I went to Taiwan, she actually had a swim competition there. Pretty cool thing too. One of the people who worked for McDonald's said, oh, you're coming? So my son and I were going to pick you up. We're going to give you a tour. We're going to take you to Taipei 101, which is the tallest building there. We want to make sure you enjoy your stay. And then they also connected us to a travel agent. So we went to some really cool villages when we were in Taiwan. So, I'm able to talk to different people about my trips because I've been to their countries or experienced their culture. And again, it's a human factor. And so once you start really opening yourself up, people are going to want to come in and help you and teach you. And I know I'm not perfect, so I'm always looking for feedback. So get used to that. And if you really care about your growth, you'll ask for feedback. And so along the way, I've had mentors and people who have helped me become better. And some of those conversations weren't super great because they were hard conversations. And those are okay too.
Thank you. That's awesome. I think that's not the second time you've talked about receiving feedback gracefully and growing from it. It's a
Mm-hmm.
great theme.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna throw you just Zach's question. I'm gonna read it. It's a thinker, so take your time to respond.
Oh
It,
no, Zach.
you'll be fine. If you could have made one change in your
Hmm.
daily life early on in your career and kept it as a daily habit or practice every day to the present day, what change would you make to have the greatest impact over a 20-year period? He says he's asking for students and in part himself. And if you need clarity, he's happy to clarify.
Um, well, great question, Zach. And I think one thing for sure is I keep this mantra of no regrets. So if I didn't do it before, I can still do it, right? So one thing I was like kicking myself about is like, oh, why did I do like a, study abroad? I didn't do that when I was in college. I shoulda, coulda, woulda. Somebody did that and I wasn't paying attention. Guess what? We did a study abroad big time in China. So why I did it later was a little bit more intense of a study abroad. So again, no regrets. Oh, I didn't finish my piano lessons. I should have been a piano player, blah, blah, blah. Well, I bought myself a piano when I could. So now, I'm not taking lessons right now, but I bought a piano because I could, and it's in the living room behind us. And I started taking lessons. It's never too late. So I think that's the thing. And so one thing I did for sure, and I kept telling people during COVID, get a journal, like write down what you're feeling that day, even if it's just for 1 minute. um, don't make it a project so it becomes hard. If you didn't write in it yesterday, it's okay, write in it today. I have written every single time I could in during COVID. I'm going to look back because I have now 3 different books. I started with this little pamphlet, it was too small. My daughter gave me one. It's right here actually. My coffee. Would you mind getting a towel, please? This is the one it's called Self-Care, and it's actually pretty cool. You wake up and you think about the day you want it to be, and then you sit down and reflect on what it was. And it has places to do walk, did you exercise, how many glasses of water did you drink? So it's just like I write down, it was a frustrating day because of X, or it's a great day because of Y. So if you guys haven't started that in some way, shape, or form, please do that. I mean, Oprah talks about it. Everybody has talked about how important journaling is for therapeutic reasons. But also, you're part of history right now. You're literally part of history. So much has happened in this year between the civil unrest, rightly so, the push on these crazy like mindset that people have about, racial discrimination, the racial construct itself, COVID. You're survivors. You're like brilliant survivors. Document it because it's going to be quickly forgotten about or erased worse yet. So if you don't document, who will? And I would say give that to your practice to your parents if you're doing it. Show them what you're doing. They'll be inspired. Because my grandmother was an incredible. She didn't even know how much of a journalist she was. She actually wrote her own memoirs, and we have it in a book over there. She died at 104 years old. So imagine what she saw. And I thank her for that because now I know my relatives. I've got 600 relatives collected in Ancestry. So just think about small things like writing. So Zach, there's not many things I would do differently. I would probably be more consistent with my exercise because not traveling also has limited me from walking in airports and moving around. I'm like, what is all this stuff? But we'll get back to it.
I love that you reference walking in airports. That's a habit of mine. So you are clearly a woman in a leadership role and a model for a lot of young women globally. And so do you have any advice for young women who are aspiring to work and lead?
I'll be bold. Do you see my saying back here? One of the things that women don't do enough of is talk about their brilliance and their shine factor. So I was just telling Teresa, I was watching Amanda Gorman's interview with Oprah last night. First of all, she's like an old soul. I don't know how in the world she got so brilliant, but because she read a lot. But she's also an amazing young girl who's not scared to shine. And her brilliance allows other people to do so. So that's the one thing I would say is don't be too ashamed to shine. It doesn't mean you have to beat your chest and act obnoxious, but if you're doing these science projects, which I've already kind of said wow to, tell somebody, post it. You're encouraging people right now where you sit. Again, somebody's just waiting to be discovered or seen. And so if you are allowing for that, someone who looks like you, right? Today, they're watching you. And so I know when people see me walk in the room, they're like, wait, what? You are in that role? Yeah. So that means you can be. I mean, how brilliant was it when Kamala was, sworn in as vice president? Little boys and girls, right? We're seeing her and the possibilities. So I just think that's the biggest thing for me is just remember that you have something to offer the world and you're here for that reason. And whatever it is will unlock itself. So just be open to change as you know I was every single day. Like I didn't think we'd be sitting here in Seattle. Like, the kids are in school here. We're activating probably doing a protest today for all the Asian hate that's erupted. But their own brand has come out since we've been here. That's all I have to say. I mean, you guys are smart. We know that. That tool's already there. You're thinkers. You're in the right position to do brilliant things. So just do them. But don't be scared too when things don't work out for you. Don't be scared because let me tell you, my road's not been easy. There's been many tears. My family knows I called them and like, I don't want to do this. I'm scared. They're like, what are you talking about? Get up, go. So
I love it. And then thinking about we only have time for this one last one, but all of the young researchers who are aspiring scientists and engineers, so male, female, whatever place they come from in North Carolina, any last thoughts for them?
Well, I don't know. Any last thoughts? I just want to let you know I'm here. So I'm on LinkedIn. If you guys want to link in with me, hopefully you guys have thought about building your own LinkedIn account. I find that group of emerging leaders on there impressive. I'm always following people. But just think about, if you have anything you need from me, just send me a note. I'm usually pretty responsive on LinkedIn. But I just wish everyone well. I mean, you guys got a bright future in front of you. So just keep up the great work.
That is wonderful.
Hi, Frida.
I am going to. We're going to have to let you go, Jacquelyn. This has been amazing. I can't thank you enough. I'm just going to quickly share with folks that we are going to take a tiny break in our live events, and we can pause for a round of applause if you want to use your reactions to give Jacquelyn the appreciation for all that you've shared with us today. I actually learned about 1,000 things, and I've already talked to you. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
For our folks who are going to be able to stay with us after the break, I dropped the link in for the Zoom. You can also get it in Symposium. It is time to hear from our state finalist. And so join us at 12:15 for the 2 minutes with a mic sessions. Thank you so much.
Can I come?
Yeah, of course. We hope so.
All right. See you guys. Thank you so much.